गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गना शॉट। गना शॉट में आप सबका स्वागत है। प्रणाम, सत श्री अकाल, वणक्कम एंड जय हिंद। आज हम बात करने वाले हैं द डेमोग्राफिक डिक्लाइन ऑफ चाइना, हाउ चाइना इज गेटिंग ओल्ड। इफ यू लुक एट दिस कार्टून, द कार्टून इज सेल्फ एक्सप्लेनेटरी। टुडे the problem of China is that every boy or girl in China is a single child who has to support his parents and his grandparents, who are all single children. This is called the 1-2-4 triangle inverted. And of course, we are looking at an aging China. China बुढ़ा होते जा रहा है और जी जिनपिंग देखिए अपना वॉकर लेके घूम रहा है। और ये दिलचस्प टॉपिक के बारे में बात करने के लिए मेरे साथ आज 4 रिसर्चर्स हैं, युवक युवी रिसर्चर्स from Chennai Center for China Studies. Let me welcome these young researchers, right? Uh, just next to me on top is Anuntra Rangan. Hi, Anuntra. Give me a tell
Hello,
everyone what
sir.
you do. Hi. Tell
So
everyone
hello.
what you do.
Okay, sir, sure. Hello, everyone. This is Anantra Rangan. So I'm a research officer at C3S. My area of focus would be China's human rights violation with specific focus on, press freedom and minority freedom. And I also happen to be interested in exploring more about China and West Asia relations. Thank you.
That's great. Next to her is Sapna Elsa Abraham. So, Sapna, a few words about you.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Sapna. I'm a research officer at C3S. My area of focus right now is in the high technology war that is happening between China and US. So, yeah, that's about me.
Okay. Thereafter, going clockwise, we have Madhumita. Madhumita, go ahead. The field is all yours.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Madhumita. I'm also a research officer at the Chennai Center for China Studies. My area of interest is development studies, generally Indian and Chinese development possibilities for cooperation and things like that. This would include climate change, poverty policies, and trade and those things. Thank you.
And of course, the last speaker will be Shruti. So, carry on, Shruti.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Shruti Sadashivam, a research officer at Chennai Center for China Studies. My chief area of interest is Sino-Indian border security, non-traditional security threats, majorly interested in refugee crisis. Thank you.
Right. आज हम ये पूरा ऑलमोस्ट तकरीबन ये पूरा आज का प्रोग्राम इंग्लिश में होगा, राइट? और जहाँ जहाँ जरूरत है मैं आके ट्रांसलेशन करूंगा, व्याख्या करूंगा और संक्षिप्त रूप में सबको बताऊंगा ताकि जो हमारे हिंदी श्रोता है दे शुड नॉट गो डिसअपॉइंटेड, राइट? So we'll start with the whole thing. The sequence will be like this. What will we do is we will touch upon 4 different aspects of this declining demography of China. Now, to give you an overview, the decline of China was known. सबको पता था कि चाइना का जो डेमोग्राफी है, उनका आबादी है वो घटेगा, इसमें दो राय नहीं था. But everyone thought that this decline will be in 2030 and उसके बाद बहुत दूर था. पर अचानक ये पैंडेमिक के वजह से और ये बाहर निकल आया कि इमीडिएटली लास्ट ईयर की चाइना का आबादी घटने शुरू हो गया, इंडिया से नीचे हो गया. पर ऐसे हाउ डिड इट हैपन सो अर्ली? वेरी सिंपल, चाइनीज लाई, झूठ बोलते हैं. सो चाइनीज ने झूठ बोलता रहा कि ये नहीं होने वाला, पर ये आ तो गया. ओके, देयर इज अ ओल्ड सेइंग, इसका परिणाम क्या होगा? देयर इज अ ओल्ड सेइंग दैट जापान ग्रू rich and then it grew old. In the case of China, right, the China is trying to become rich before it grows old, but it will not so, because China is not still a rich country. Japan was a rich country when it became old, but Let me put things in context. China is aging at the fastest rate in the history of mankind. Its decline is so fast, these ladies will tell you shortly. It is unmatched. What it took over 100 years in France and Germany, and took about 25 to 40 years in South Korea and Japan, is happening just under 20 years in China, and it is irreversible. We are seeing for the first time, हम तो नहीं देखेंगे पर ये लेडीज जो हैं और आप जो ऑडियंस में जो यंग लोग हैं, यू विल सी द डिक्लाइन ऑफ अ नेशन. ये डिक्लाइन कैसे अफेक्ट करेगा, हम अलग अलग किस्सों में बात करेंगे, एंड वील सी व्हाट इट इज. द फर्स्ट topic for today will be one child policy, which Anuntra will talk about, right? And she will talk about China's Malthusian, family planning regime. And over to you, Anuntra.
First of all, I would like to thank you for giving me this wonderful opportunity on presenting this, sir. So, with no ado, I'll start my discussion.
Yeah, please
So,
go ahead.
first of all, I'd like to say China holds second position in actually two things. One, for its economy, ranging to $19.37 million, and two, for its population, ranging up to 1.42 billion as of July 15, 2023. So, as we all know, China's total fertility rate has dropped considerably since the 1970s. So, after the fluctuating, around the replacement level in the 1980s, it fell even further below that, around 1990s. So, since the 1970s, China's fertility transition has been a demographic revolution. According to the 2000 census, China's total fertility rate was actually reduced to around from 1.4 to 1.6. So, according to the preliminary 2010 census, the estimate states that the total fertility rate is 1.18, far below the actual replacement level. So, the substantial fall in the fertility rate can be attributed to China's population policy, known as the one-child policy. So, from the strict control of population growth in the beginning to the stabilization of low fertility level in the 2010, and most of all into maintaining and improving the current population policy, China's population policy has undergone a number of changes that have impacted the nation's economy and social development, and has substantially attributed for human rights violations as well with regards to female, which we will be discussing later. So, following the establishment of People's Republic of China in 1949, the Chinese government policy and the propaganda encouraged families to have many children. The first census results, released on November 1st, 1954, revealed that the population had grown rapidly. So during this period, both the central government's instructions on the issue of population control and a report of the recommendations of the developing economy in the second 5-year plan made at the 8th People's Congress suggested that the fertility control was important. However, Mao Zedong's stance towards fertility policy shifted. And academicians like Ma Yuzhu, who pushed for and stated thoughts on how to achieve birth control, was labeled anti-party, anti-socialist, right-wing person during the anti-rightist campaign. So as a result, this policy was halted for the particular amount of time. Right after when Deng Xiaoping took the place, he set the objective of quadrupling, yearly per capita income by 2000 in the late 1970s, emphasizing the potential contribution of curbing population growth to that goal. The CPC Central Committee issued an open letter to all members of the Communist Party and Communist Youth League on the same issue of controlling the population, thereby in 1980, which stated that couples should have only one child, which was also known as one child per couple, and as we all know right now, one child policy. So what is this one child policy basically? It's about having one couple having one child. So this was intended to alleviate the social, economic and environmental problems associated with the country's rapidly growing population. This rule was introduced in 1917 and it phased out till 2015. The Chinese State Council launched the program in 1979 so that the rate of population growth may be brought under control as soon as possible. However, the policy's origin can be traced, as mentioned earlier, back to Mao Zedong's belief that more people we have, the stronger we are. an ideology that prevented China from developing the highly successful voluntary family planning programs of countries like, of other countries in the 1960s, during the 1960s. The policies raised in Thatre was presented as a growing realization that China's population expansion, which actually doubled from 500 million to 1 billion in just a span of 30 years, as in from 1950 to 1980, was unsustainable. A legal structure was created to support the policy. So this framework is divided into three parts. According to the constitution, the state promotes, according to the constitution that was there during 1970s, the state promotes family planning so that the population growth may fit the plans for economic and social development, because China was at time during that time was a developing country who was actually trying to raise up from the ashes. So its main focus was keenly on economic and social development. The population and family planning law, promulgated in 2001, is the main national law on family planning, and the measures on the administration of social upbringing fee, which was implemented in 2002, which sets penalties for policy infractions, and it was applicable countrywide. While national law and regulation outline the fundamental concepts of the program, details are left to the provincial population and family planning rules, making it difficult to track the policy's intricacies and enforcement methods. Key components of this policy is exceptions to the general one child per couple, restrictions, and the establishment of punishments for policy violators were largely, in the hands of the municipal authorities. So generally, if you see, there would be consequences of whatever that we do. So for the one-child policy, also China had some major consequences. The total pace of natural growth was slowed down. The Chinese government believed that the measure averted 400 million births, while some academics disagree that it could have been more than that. Sons were often favored over daughters, hence, China's overall sex ratio shifted towards men. In 2016, men outnumbered women by 33.59 million. Because of the preference, for sons, the number of abortion of female fetuses increased. As a result of the program, the number of babies slain, abandoned, or placed in orphanages soared. Families who followed the policies were rewarded with financial benefits. Parents with only one kid are given one child certificates, which qualifies them to a number of privileges and incentives that was, given by the government. Parents who have one kid, are rewarded with an extra month's salary every year until the child is 14, higher wages, interest-free loans, retirement funds, cheap fertilizers, better housing, wages, and all that, better healthcare for that matter, and priority in school enrollment was also given a lot of preference to those who had only one child. Furthermore, women who marry after the age of 25 received a prolonged maternity leave if they fall pregnant with only one child again. If the parents have a second kid, the benefits they earn from one child are lost, and they may face additional punishment for having another child. Millions of these Chinese parents were subjected to the political policies, harassment, enforcement techniques, which included forced sterilizations and abortions, as we already discussed about how female infanticides were killed. In families that already had one child, the births of additional children in violation of the one-child policies were often undocumented, which led to problems later on for those children as they struggle to receive an education or find work elsewhere, or or even register for a passport for that matter. Even after one-child policy was resigned, China's birth and fertility rates remained low, leaving the country with a population that was aging too rapidly, and as well as a shrinking workforce it had to face. Those, although exceptions differ from one province to other, some of the following which commonly applied the exceptions allow couple to have one more child, as in some exceptions were given. There are few exceptions I would like to name. There are a lot of exceptions. I would like to name only a few. If their firstborn child is disabled, they can have a second child. If both spouses belong to an ethnic minority group, they can have a second child. If both couples are only children, they can have another child. If a pair divorces and a person marries someone who has no children of their own, or if the couple is Chinese and are returned from an overseas location where they have legal status, can have another child. And most of all, this policy does not apply to Hong Kong and Macau citizens or foreign residents for that matter. So people who opted for nuclear family setup realized that they were well settled with the idea of one child. However, people with agrarian families realized that they needed a boy child to uplift their lives, hence had opted for a second one, or mostly ended up with abortions. For years to come, this one child policy will have an impact on will impact on marriage in the country and a variety of aspects surrounding marriage. Because there were very fewer females, there were very fewer women of childbearing age in China. The decline in birth rates resulted in fewer children as death rates fell and lifespan rates increased. By 2050, if I'm not wrong, it is anticipated that one third of China's population would be over the age of 60, which we can already see that happening. This means that more old people will rely on their offspring to assist them, and very fewer youngsters will be able to do so. Because as you can see, China's working sector has also been reducing its level of giving providing wages in work for that matter. As a result, China is suffering a labor crisis and will also struggle to maintain its aging population through state services. Finally, the one-child policy has resulted in an increase in the number of undocumented non-first-born children. That's how they are, recognized in the country. They are unable to leave China lawfully since they are undocumented and cannot apply for a passport, as mentioned earlier. They do not have a public access to any of health benefits or education for whatever that matters. Their parents were frequently penalized or fired from their employment due to their unrecognized status. One child policy was so effective that PRC succeeded in its motive of constraining the population that it was able to reverse the decision at one point, and that's how policy adjustments came into lead. Sir, next slide, please. China sure did, take efforts to realign their interests and pursue by implementing another policy called two-child policy. After 30 years, population aging, labor shortages, sex ratio imbalance at birth, and pressure on social welfare programs urged that China's stringent one-child policy should be relaxed for the country's development and prosperity as well. Following that, a partial two-child policy was adopted in November 2013. As a result, from the one-child policy to a universal two-child policy, that was a major shift, allowing couples to have two children if either husband or wife was an only child. This policy went into effect in Shanghai in March 2014. Only 145 million, as in 132% of 11 billion eligible couples, filed for permission to have a second child by May 2015. Because the vast majority of these eligible couples were city dwellers, the poor uptake has been attributed to the high cost of raising children in actual cities. Couples who applied for a second child were younger, had a higher family income, had a young first child who was more likely to be a female, because all of us, not only China but people around the country, prefer male child, if I'm not wrong. This low uptake, along with calls from academics and media, most likely hastened the unveiling of the universal two-child policy. First, the implications were on the fertility rates. Second, the effects on birth outcomes, such as the sex ratio, the proportion of births with advanced mother age, preterm births, cesarean delivery, which may also be associated with high prevalence of birth deficits. Fertility preference surveys conducted over the last 2 decades, demonstrates that China has uncertainty. China has certainly become a low fertility society. And such polls are often regarded to overstate real fertility. According to the findings of certain surveys that were conducted, outside of China, about China, over 90% of women want only 1 or 2 children, whereas nearly 2/3 of women in larger cities want only 1 child. Reason offered include the significant cost of childbearing, particularly for schooling, and as well as the impact of parental lifestyle and the mother's profession, because this is a modern world right now when women sure wants to work just as equal to men. And now, under any policy scenario, the Chinese population would age rapidly. So the number of over 65s covered by the universal two-child policy is predicted to reach 18% by 2030, with rural areas accounting for roughly twice as many as metropolitan areas. The rapid acceleration in the aging population associated with the one-child policy has created a significant challenge for China, and population aging will be significantly less serious with the universal two-child policy than if the one-child policy remained unchanged. However, in China, 2 kinds of old individuals are particularly susceptible. The first would be the phenomenon known as the empty nesters. I mean, those who live in families without children, basically, which is mostly the result of a substantial out of migration of young people, during the rapid urbanization and employment mobility. The second would be the disabled elderly population. Obviously, nowadays the mindset and the ideology of people would be that if a parent is disabled, people the kids, the children tend to abandon them. That happens in almost all countries. The premature death of an only child was perhaps the second feared family tragedy under the one child policy. According to the data from the 2000 census, as I repeat again, the average risk of an only child dying was 4% before their mother reached the age of 45, 12% before they reach the age of 80, 16% before they reach the age of 85, and 21% before they reach the age of 90. Permanent childlessness for a spouse or lone parent can have major effects for their mental and physical health, particularly because many older Chinese people rely on offspring for care. Demographers predict that there were over 1 million permanently childless families in 2010 due to the death of single child and due to the one child policy, the number growing by approximately 78,000 per year. It was expected that the two child policy would provide essential benefits in many ways. Longitudinal healthy aging surveys show that the older persons cared for daughters rather than sons have reduced mortality and a lower risk of cognitive decline. Further research reveals that older parents are more satisfied with daughter provided care than son provided care, and that older parents have better ties with their daughters than their sons. It was unimaginable during the one child policy, as people preferred, all parents preferred male children. The one child restriction, particularly in cities, precluded nearly half of all couples from having daughters. The new policy did allow more couples to have a daughter after a son. As a result, more elderly parents will benefit from the care of daughters, improving their mental health and physical health as well. This,
That's
though, might be seen as a positive certainty. However, it was not. Although the new strategy was unlikely to result in a significant increase in China's average birth rate, the country's very varied development implies that increase in fertility may be bigger in some locations, such as rural areas and small towns. Local authorities will need to was actually monitoring these changes in order to plan for expanded capacity in health services, particularly maternal and child health care, if needed.
Anuntra, just get to the three-child policy now.
Sorry,
Yeah,
sir.
get to the three-child policy.
Yeah, okay, so sure. So, however, now because of the plummeting, birth rates, the government desperately wants women in the country to have more children, which brings us to the three-child policy of China, as mentioned. Since 2016, the authorities moved swiftly from one to two to three-child policy. These changes were buttressed with tax cuts, subsidies, cash rewards, and other incentives, and laced with propaganda about the virtue and duty of having more children. But none of these worked well so far. China's birth rates continues to drop. The total fertility rate decreased from 2.6 in the late 1980s to just 1.15 in 2021. In fact, the 2022 population might have declined for the very first time since the Great Famine of which occurred in from 1959 to 1961, according to the projection by the Shanghai Academy of Social Sciences. The government's announcement of the three-child policy in June 2021 was met with much skepticism. However, for Chinese women, the unequal amount of childcare, tasks they would bear, as well as the potential negativity on their profession, is key additional factor for their unwillingness to bear another child. According to a 2022 survey online, a professional women, online survey for professional women jobs by a job search website, only 0.8% expressed a desire to have a third child. So I would like to move to the
Yeah, last slide.
yeah, this I would like to do a small comparison of India's and China's demography. So China and India together account for about 36% of the total world population, 67% of Asia's population. By 2027, India will have more people than China, with approximately 1.47 billion people, as we have already exceeded by then. Currently, China's population growth rate is only 0.39%, while India's population growth rate is 0.99%. China had crossed the 1 billion milestone in 1980 and India in 1997. population of China will peak in 2015, and however India's will peak 2031 respectively. So, sorry, excuse me. As of the period 2015 to 2020, India's fertility rate is 2.24% compared to China's that of 1.69. So, as we all know, China's fertility rate was higher from the period of 1965 to 1970. Since then, China saw a rapid decline as the one-child policy was implemented. With the median age of 28.43, India is 10 years younger than China, having half of the population below 38.42 years. For the group aged below 29, China's population is roughly 72% of India's. Both
Good.
countries have a higher male population compared to females. According to the data by the UN, an analysis by New York Times and other well-versed organizations and institutions, China will face a severe drop in their population, and this might be a turning point of China's history. With
Good.
population
That
decline,
we'll talk of it. We'll talk of the population decline a little later, right? Okay.
okay.
So, she put across a lot of things very nicely. She put across the problems of the one child policy. मैं सबको बताना चाहता हूँ ये जो वन चाइल्ड पॉलिसी है इसको नियुक्त किया है डेंग जियाओपिंग ने. When Deng Xiaoping made this policy, he also seeded the seed of Chinese decline at that point of time. Today, China is in a state of where their population is declining irreversibly. It is aging fast, and they don't have enough working hands. As a result, total productivity in the country is going down. And their two-child policy and their three-child policies, as the other ladies will tell down the line, will not work or might not work at all. Okay, now we will talk of the जो चाइना का population decline है उसके बारे में बात करते हैं. And after Anuntra's in-depth research and the way she's put across everything, we'll now have Sapna talking about China's population decline. Anuntra, well done. We'll come back to you later. Sapna, take over, please.
Sure, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Andra, for a very wonderful presentation. So, I'll be talking about China's general population decline. As you all know, that China has been facing a very the population is declining in a very sharp rate, and since 2022, the China is one of the most world's populous country, and it's facing a negative population growth rate. So, according to the National Bureau of Statistics in China, came up with a preliminary report in 2023 in month of Jan. They came up with a report which stated that there was a 8 lakh reduction in the population of China in 2022 with compared to the population 2021. So if you're looking at the screen, if you look at the presentation, you'll see that in 2021, the total population was 1.4126 million, and in 2022 it got reduced to 1.4118. So in this, you might feel that it's a very small amount of population, but then this is the first time in 6 decades that the population growth rate has population rate has gone down in China, and this is the first time that in 60 decades that the population has gone down. The last time it gone down this rapidly, the decline happened this rapidly during the famines that was caused by the Great Leap Forward in the 1960s. After which China had seen increase in their population growth, and we will see that in the end of the presentation. So, according to the National Bureau of Statistics, they say that there was 9.56 million births in 2022, and this was and in 2021 there was 10.62 million births. So the birth rate has reduced in a year, and there was the birth rate was reduced to 6. So it was 6.77 in 2022, and in 2021 it was 7.52 was a birth rate. There was a 10% reduction in the birth rate in China, and there was and the number of deaths in China is in increase. According to the data of China, has been increasing. In 2021, the death rate, the number of deaths was 10.14 million, and in 2022, this is increased to 10.41 million. But this death rate is going to slow down also, because the life expectancy in China is expected to grow around 75, and 77.47%. It's going to go up to 81 when it comes to 2050, 2050. The number is going to go high, around 81%. Yes, so now going into the birth rate in China. So I already spoke about the birth rate. It's 6.77. It was 6.77 2022, and it was 7.52. There was a 10% reduction. And one very concerning part about this is the fertility rate. China currently, they have a fertility rate of 1.2 birth per women. But then, if you, according to the replacement level, which means that the replacement level should be 2.1, which means that for uh, a couple, you need to have 2.1 children, or 2.5 children, to have for the nation to have a very stabilized population, which has gone down drastically when it comes to China. By around 1900s, 1990s, China's fertility rate it had gone down in 1990s itself to 1.5. And this particular fertility rate has resulted, is one of the major reasons for this demographic decline that China has been facing. And this has resulted in a major, very crucial, um, issue when it comes to this decline, is the disturbed age distribution. This age distribution, we will see in the next slide, that results in the economic growth of the country. Yes, in this we can see that the fertility rates has gone down. Yes. Now we'll go to the gender imbalance. So gender imbalance is also something that has been major, issue in China. If you look at, there was a dramatic gender imbalance that originated due to the strong cultural and social preferences for male children, and also a major effect of the one child policy that was implemented by China. There was selective abortions when people were given an option of having one child. They were used to prefer men, and the female population started to go down. And it says in 2021 there were roughly 30 million more men than women in China. And yes, so you can see very clearly that the sex ratio is reduced from 1953 to 2022. In 2022, the sex ratio is reduced to 104.69%. So this widening demographic imbalance results from a, as you saw earlier, low birth rate combined with the rapid aging population in China. So the workforce in China is shrinking very rapidly in millions. Yeah, you can see the age distribution in China right now. So if you see right now in 2022, this is the 2022 data. Uh, the working population is comes between 15 to 64 years. That is around 68%. That right now it consists of 68% in China. And the 0.14%, that's the dependency population, that is 17%. And the 65 plus, that's the retired age group, this 15%, they consider the 15% of the population. What happens now is, because this the decline is happening in the population, the the workforce is going to go down, and the dependency group, that is the 0 to 14 years old and 65% to increase, which means that there will be a burden on the total country, the economy, because the workforce is going down. So the working age population peaked during 2011. There was more than 900 million, which has been declining so far. and by mid-century they are supposed to have 700 million, and these workers will have nearly uh, 500 million Chinese age 60 and over will be on. So these working age people have to care for these growing old age people, which will, as I said before, that will have a huge impact on the economy. So this China's aging crisis is deepening with 280.04 million people aged over 60 was there in China during 2022. In 2022, it was just 267.36 million people. So there was an increase from 18.9% to 19.8% of the population. So some of the estimates from UN World Bank estimates that the dependency ratio of China, as you can see, the ratio, which means the ratio of people over age 65 to number of people aged 15 to 64, to reach nearly 52% by mid-century. So this would mean that for every two working age individuals, there will be one person aged over 65.
Yeah.
So China's working age population, those between 16 to 59, it stood at 16 to now looking at the 16 to 59 stood at 875.56 million at the end of 2022. So when you're seeing this becomes a problem because Chinese economy was built on cheap labor due to a high population, and this shift will lead to reduced productivity in China. And China's large surplus labor pool begins to dwindle. Manufacturing wages will increase, and the sector will decrease in its profitability. So there's a saying in China that traditionally most Chinese children care for their parents through old age. I'm sure that in entire South Asia this will be the case. And there's a Chinese expression that says that raise children to provide for old age. And as China's working age is declining, um, the proportion of the elderly will increase, and the burden of supporting these retirees will grow. Yes, so if you look at this chart right now, this shows the trend of Chinese population over the years from 1959. So all these years are the census years that Chinese Communist Party have taken. So if you can see, in 1961 there was a dip due to the famine, and later on Chinese population has been increasing, and the more it goes after 1980, the birth rate started to reduce very drastically. And in the first time in 2022, we first decline happened after 1970, 1961, and according to estimates by UN and World Bank, this is going to decline more in by around 2050 and 20 it's going to decrease very dramatically later on. So one more issue with this China for the years, as Sir said in the beginning, China has been lying to the people or lying to the population that their population is a good thing, that their population is decreasing, that people will get more opportunity. And even now, even that the data show, the trends suggest that China's population is going to decrease over the years. Demographic things, working population, the workforce is going to decrease. China keeps lying to the population that this won't affect the overall lifestyle of the people, and China won't Chinese people won't have any effects on them due to this declining population. So that's from me. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Uh, uh, that was very well put across, Sapna. Now, what Sapna has brought out very important. दो चार पॉइंट मैं बताना चाहता हूँ. चाइना का आबादी घट रहा है, ये घटेगा. आप देखिए, बहुत जल्दी घटेगा. घटना शुरू हो गया. हो सकता है ये this decline has started already 10 years back. According to one Chinese researcher who's now in USA, this decline started 10 years back. Okay. But one thing which is indisputable is their working age population started reducing around 2011, 12, 13. And if you correlate the working age population reduction, wage increases, and their economy, GDP, which has been going down, there's a beautiful correlation that the decline in China started around 2012, 13. So, a lot of figures which are coming out of China are fake. Now, uh, a major point which Sapna brought out is that the replacement level is 2.1, that is for childbirth, to maintain the population where it is. In China, it is at 1.1 or 1.2 at this point of time. It is the lowest in the world and it cannot be replaced. So China's population decline is certain, which means there will be lesser working hands and more old people. So that means lesser people will have to take care of more older people. So there is a major demographic problem which China is going to face. Now, what we're going to see is what is the effects of the demographic decline in China, both the short and long term effects. Madhumita will outline that to us. Over to you, Madhumita. Take on.
Good evening, everyone. Like Sir has said, I'll be talking about the effects of the demographic decline in China. I will be covering both short term and long term effects. Yeah, next slide. So this figure is taken from the United Nations Division of Population, and this shows the projected figures for China's population decline, which was released in 2022. This is to contextualize the presentation. As we can see here, and as we discussed before, China's population has declined at even a faster rate than we expected it to. So this is something for us to keep in mind. So next slide. According to Feng Wang, who was a researcher at the University of California, China reaps two kinds of demographic dividends. A demographic dividend is basically an economic concept that refers to the result of the interaction between the age structure of a country, that is, how much percentage of the population is at what age, and the divergence between the production and consumption in that country. So this dividend is reaped fully, but that is entirely dependent on the institutional and policy environment of each country. So the first demographic dividend was due to the time in China where the productive population was growing faster than the actual population. And the yield of this dividend was felt during the first half of the 21st century. This yield peaked in 2013, but after that, they have not felt the yield of the first demographic dividend. It's based on the concept that an aging population then changes the processes of wealth creation. So what this researcher has theorized is that there is a possibility for a second demographic dividend, which is based off the model of East Asian tigers, where there is a lower disposable income of the working population. But what this also means is that there is a lot of wealth transfer. Like Sapna had mentioned, since there are older people that need to be taken care of in terms of medical services and old age homes and things like that, people now have less disposable income because there is a wealth transfer to the elderly. The age structure also may result to a higher savings rate because older people are less likely to spend as much as young people. And this can, or there is, it is an open-ended question whether this can increase capital intensity or not. This is based on the economic policies of every country. Traditionally, China has been more manufacturing oriented and reliant on its cheap labor. So far it has not showed the kind of capital intensity that has been displayed by certain other countries like the US, but this is something that has been theorized. Next slide. Yeah. So in terms of businesses, the one short-term impact within certainly 5 years is the decrease in consumer expenditure due to the age structure effect. This is basically the fact that older people tend to spend less on consumer kind of goods very differently from younger populations. So this will be a short-term effect on businesses. The long-term impacts is that there is a loss of human capital. Second, there is a loss of labor, which means that labor costs tend to rise. What this means is that although it is theorized that there could be an increase in employment rates, there is also a very heavy risk of capital flight. That is, countries may choose not to invest in China but invest in neighboring countries like Vietnam that actually offer cheaper labor. There is a decrease in consumption expenditure and a drop in consumer demand. Next slide. Although there is a drop in consumer demand, there is also a rise in demand for certain other kinds of services, and this may also eventually become a strain on the economy. So these are basically healthcare related healthcare and elderly related demands. One is that older people have shown a higher propensity to travel, so the tourism industry is given a bit of a boost. Elderly universities and health-based services and increasing access to the internet are theorized as possible demands in China due to the change in age structure, but this is based on the Japanese model. So how this will be implemented in China is very it's a question mark, because like sir said that Japan grew rich before it grew poor, so it was able to invest in tourism, elderly university, health consciousness and internet, whereas China is not yet at that stage and is still thinking to meet basic pension targets for the elderly. So this we don't know how far this may be a reality. This places a big strain on the government healthcare infrastructure. This particular point has been highlighted in the last few years because of COVID-19 and China's management of COVID-19. It's brought to light the healthcare systems around the world, but particularly in China as well, are very, despite being a so-called socialist country, it's not equipped to deal with such a vast healthcare crisis. So it begs the question of what happens when the population is so rapidly aging. So the final point is sort of and trying to map China's response to these kinds of challenges, that there is an increased push for automation, training and development, and diversifications of products and services. How far this will be fruitful is up to only time will tell. Next slide. So lower wage rates in neighboring countries will play a very significant role in determining China's economic trajectory, particularly countries like India, where we have a very healthy working population. So that automatically means that it is our chance and other countries' chance to reap the demographic dividend that is given to us because of Chinese declining population. International competitiveness of Chinese exports may also take a hit due to their lack of access to goods and to cheap labor. This is known as capital flight, and corruption and polarization of political issues also make China a less attractive location of investment. Next slide. Yeah, this will cover social impacts and possibilities of China's demographic dividend. So one of the most shocking effects is the pension funds for urban workers that may run into debt in 5 years, and it will become insolvent in less than 15 years. China will also attempt to increase the retirement ages in order to make people work more. So this could cause a lot of exploitation of the elderly and overwork on the part of Chinese population. However, some people also theorize that it may ease the pressure on the environment and bring more women into the workforce, because China is leading India in terms of women in the formal economy. However, policies like the three-child policy come into play, which may force women to take up more reproductive roles and not actually bring them into the workflow. So these are dichotomies to be considered. If there is enough capital intensification, there is an opportunity to create high wage and high value jobs, but that is again going to be seen only in the next few years. Next slide.
Oh, sorry.
So please. Yeah. Another factor is that in both countries like China and India, there is a phenomenon known as the brain drain, where a lot of educated people go away to Western countries to work. If there is an increased demand for youth workers, there is for the Chinese side a possibility that they can create an environment to bring people back to emigrate to China. Even though the Chinese party assures their citizens that there will be no loss in the lifestyle, if they have to deepen their capital to meet the demographic decline, it comes with foregone consumption and a lowered standard of living for the Chinese people, which may cause a lot of strain politically. The rural urban divide is also an important factor when considering the demographic decline. Firstly, China's cities, which symbolized its economic growth, they are also aging, and one-fifth of Chinese cities have now a population aged above 65. Older people who remain in rural areas also will undergo a transformation, because this may pose a threat to food security, because the agrarian side of China may take a hit due to the population reduction. Um, Again, with regards to their pension, pay-go policies refer to the kind of pension policies where Chinese have to pay as you go. They have to earn their own pensions over the course of their working lives. And what this essentially means is that they don't get the kind of social support from their government. So even if China is able to provide that kind of social support, then it offsets capital accumulation. So this is the kind of vortex that China may be stuck in. China also recently released its dual circulation system. This basically pushes both exports and domestic demand. So it remains to be seen how the dual circulation system is going to come into play when demand is going to take a major hit. I think China may be thinking of investing more in healthcare and those kinds of investments, but only time will tell how that will go. With regards to export, there's hardline political stance on a lot of issues has put off a lot of countries, its own neighbors, and countries across the ocean as well, who may be more reluctant to invest. So how China's export competitiveness may be hit is still to be seen. Final, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. So this is
Yeah,
a brief presentation on the possible effects of the demographic decline.
yeah,
I think things will solidify more in the coming years. Thank you.
yeah. Thanks a lot, Madhumita. You put out everything very nicely as to what will be the effects. See, major effects, and that effect is already being felt in China already. Aging population, China can't look after them. They don't have a healthcare system. Now the result is already there are, uh, protests in China, so that that they're not getting their insurance benefits, that they're not getting their thing. That is one major issue. Second, labor costs have gone up. As labor costs have gone up, the exports have gone down, the costs of products have gone down, exports have gone down, factories are closing. There's an economic slowdown. Both these have been affected by the COVID. The whole thing has crystallized and precipitated. You see that there's a major demographic shift happening in China, and there's an economic downturn in China. On the other hand, Xi Jinping is going into militarization, diplomacy, and technology, and something on a third angle. So, actually, if you see, China is today going in three different directions. The, the Chinese Communist Party is taking it in some direction where it wants to become, establish a China centric world order. But that China centric world order is going to be a very of old people. So there is a problem which is coming ahead, which I thought we need to know, and which will be based on what Madhumita has very nicely put across. Okay, because some of these things which are happening in China are irreversible. Now, what will be the effects? What will be the long-term effects? How it's going to affect, and what China is trying to do to offset all this? Shruti will explain to us. Shruti, over to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. I'll be talking about how effective China has been in promoting its two-child policy and three-child policy in terms of the initiatives that it has taken. Second slide, sir.
Yeah.
Uh, so I have tried to derive certain objectives that China is trying to achieve by analyzing the measures that China has taken in terms of promoting its two-child and three-child policies. First is it wants to achieve quality population. What do I mean by quality? China wants to have a rich population that contributes to the Chinese economy. It wants a young population. Most importantly, it does not want any kind of population growth in Xinjiang or Tibet Autonomous Region, because and you can clearly see that because two-child policy was not implemented in those regions. They do not, so which basically means they want only a set of people, say belonging to Han Chinese, and people belonging to a particular ethnicity. They clearly do not want Uyghur Muslims. And most importantly, they want a population that would provide them with sustainable labor supply, which means those kinds of population would help in contributing to the economy of the country. Next slide, please. So these are certain initiatives that China has taken in order to boost its population. First is it's tried to roll out a lot of nursery safety at nurseries. It has rolled out nutrition programs. It has expanded the maternity insurance coverage. It's introduced paternity leave. It's trying to promote values of having more children amongst the people in the form of editorials and through other advertisement channels. It's also providing free services to couples to have a second child. Next slide, please. And it has taken a lot of complementary initiatives such as easing marriage regulations. For instance, it's made it more easier for people to obtain marriage certificates, and migrants need not go to their hometowns to register for their marriage, but rather they can do it in the place that they are working. And they've also introduced women's rights legislation, which is called as Women's Rights and Interest Protection legislation, which came into effect in 2023. It seeks to combat gender inequality and workplace harassment. And other apart from this, it has also like tried to boost healthcare for women and children. However, we clearly see that all of these initiatives are not targeting the issue in China, or the issue as to why women are not willing to give birth to more children. One problem is money. Housing is really costly in the state. Education also is highly costly, and for 35 years, China has been promoting the values, or rather glorifying having one child. Now, in order to reverse those 35 years of propaganda, is it really possible? It clearly is not. It's going to take a lot of time for them. And other social challenges include there's disproportionate burden on women who will have to cater to their children. They'll have to go to work. They'll have to look after their household chores. So women are clearly disinterested in birthing more children. And there is low fertility trap theory that clearly says that an ideal family for a young Chinese is having one father, mother, and one kid. That's the idea of a family for the young generation. So for them to even think of having two children in the family or three children in the family is kind of abnormal. And also, next slide, please. And those who opt for two children are those with strong son preference. That's what these two studies that's presented clearly indicate. And there is an unbalanced gender ratio where there's more men in China than women. These two studies also clearly show that women are really not interested in birthing more than one kid. Next slide, please. And the graph here clearly shows that there are a lot of initiatives, like I had mentioned, that China has introduced in order to promote its two-child and three-child policies. But here on the graph, we clearly see that the birth rate is still declining. So in this sense, we can say that it's the pro-natalist policies of China is not really that effective. Next slide, please. There are certain lessons that we can clearly learn from China's past demographic policies, the one-child policy. First lesson is that the reproductive rights in China is clearly a joke. At that time also, women were not really consulted with regards to what their child preference was, because it was implemented the China's way, which is a very violent and involuntary way that China generally undertakes, the coercive approach. The second lesson we clearly learn is that, I would like to put it in the form of a question. Is policy implementation easier in autocracies if they follow their approach of coercivity? Until now, China has not yet started taking initiatives that involves force and coercion. The initiatives that China has rolled out in terms of promoting its two-child and three-child policies are basically what democratic countries would generally do if they face aging of population. For instance, nutrition programs, maternity programs, these are the kind of initiatives that China has taken until now. We are yet to see that what the coercive phase of China in promoting its two-child and three-child policies. Next slide, please. Coming back to answering my chief research question of the day, how effective is China's pro natalist policies? Interviews of women who were prevented from giving birth to more than one child clearly tell us how women are traumatized because of those policies. But at the same time, these are the women who still state that although they had to undergo the trauma, the one child policy was a need of the hour, and what the government did was for the welfare of the nation. One Child Nation is a documentary that everybody must watch that clearly records the first-hand interviews of women who had to undergo forceful abortions and sterilizations, and who also think what the government did was right because whatever the government did was for the welfare of the nation. On this note, I conclude by saying that China's two-child policy and three-child policy initiatives are undoubtedly ineffective. However, I do not want to put China's tools of propaganda and coercion off the table, given the kind of authoritarian state China is. It makes sense to put forth the view that women are unwilling to give birth in China, so China's pro natalist policies are bound to fail. If at all, China was a state that respected the reproductive rights of women. If China was able to succeed in imposing forced sterilization, they can do so in introducing forced fertilization, say by banning abortions, which China has already been started doing, legalizing surrogacy, appointing say, the same family planning officials to force women to give birth via artificial insemination and the like. However, these are just hypothetical scenarios that I'm proposing, which might be proved false in the near future. But in examining China's pro natalist policies at present, 2023, we can clearly see that these initiatives that China is undertaking in promoting the two child and three child policies are certainly failing. Thank you.
Yeah, that was quite nicely put across. Uh, uh, Shruti put across to all of us what the core of China's problem is. Let me put it, the core of China's problem, why this declining population will not reverse, lies with their women. There is a gender imbalance. The number of girls in the country are lesser for whatever, all the reasons which have been told to you already. Women are more emancipated, they are working, they are more educated, they don't want to get married, they want to be independent. That's the number two. Number three, the cost of housing in China is exorbitant compared to the salaries they earn. The cost of educating a child and bringing up a child is the highest in China in the world, right? So take all these factors into consideration. This reversal is very difficult to happen. Shruti also mentioned about the authoritarian system coercing people to get a second or the third child. You know, I am reminded of a story which I told these young ladies earlier in the evening. The Chinese Communist Party member in a particular province, uh, he was exhorting everyone to have second and third child, all the young girls and young ladies. So all these girls and ladies and people told him the day the Communist Party members start having the second and third child, we'll also have. And that was the end of that meeting. So the communist people preach something which is good prescription for others and bad for them, and they lie, and whatever they have done is almost irreversible, and if this cannot be reversed, it will not happen. You will hear in many articles that South China Morning Post and China Daily and this and that, lot of things are happening. It is not happening. Fundamentally, the two child and three child policy is duff, and the birth rates are declining. You forget the graphs. Kindergarten schools in China are closing. Every last year itself, 5,000 schools have closed. Just that's a figure which has come out in a thing, right? That is what about what Shruti has said. Now let me put the whole thing, wrap up the whole thing before I take some questions. We heard 4 young researchers, research and tell you about various parts of this demographic decline. What is the common theme? इनके चारों के बीच में कॉमन थीम क्या है? कॉमन थीम ये निकल के आ रहा है कि चाइना का आबादी घट रहा है और वो वापस होने वाला नहीं है. राइट, वर्किंग पॉपुलेशन घटने वाला है, लोग बूढ़े हो रहे हैं, चाइना के पास उतना पैसा नहीं है, चाइना डजंट हैव द मनी टू अफोर्ड इट्स ओल्ड पीपल. For any country to transition from middle age to old age, the economic structure has to change. That is not happening. The Chinese Communist Party knew about this problem as early as 2001-2. It was told to them, but they did nothing because politically it was inconvenient. The communist rhetoric kept pushing the one-child policy when they already had come to know it was useless and it was detrimental to their system. They continued with it till 2016. So the Chinese have got into a self-defeating mode in this demographic decline, and that is what is going to defeat the Chinese Communist Party ultimately. Right. So this mega problem will not run away. That brings me to our next question. Everyone says, including Goldman Sachs, that the Chinese economy will go up and become the largest one. With a dwindling population, how will it go up? After all, economies are of people. Economies are not of donkeys. Economies are not of cows or pigs. It's of people. Unless people work, economies don't happen. If you don't have people to work, there's a problem. And as China ages, and rural China is aging much faster than urban China, so there are no working hands in the farms, so that agriculture is going to go down. You look at it from any point of view, and I have been studying this for the past 3 to 4 years. I don't see China getting out of this trap. So when someone tells me Xi Jinping is going to convert China into Tianxia, which is mandate from heaven, into the all under heaven kind of a story, it is not going to happen. It's a narrative which we should not believe. The true facts are what has come out. In fact, the situation might be even more worse, just like their economy. Right? I leave it at that. I will like to thank all of you who have attended this, and all of you who have praised these young ladies. I'm very proud that they have done so well. And I'm very thankful to General Rajiv Narayanan to have come, taken time out, and complimented all these young ladies for the in-depth research with which they did the whole thing, and the lucidity with which they spoke. I also thank Rishi Atreya from the International Foundation, Research Foundation, who has attended and has praised this. And I'm very glad that so many of you have come from abroad to watch these young ladies talk about China. And one more important thing, why I keep bringing these ladies and researchers from the Chennai Center of China Studies, is they need an outlet to speak to people about China. And we need to be reassured that our next generation is doing research on China in varied fields, which is going on, as they themselves said. Okay, we'll talk.